we might as well take a look at our other tortoise. His name is Darwin. He didn't come to us. Both Honu and Darwin were named before they came to us, so we've kept their name. But this is a sulcata tortoise, also known as a spur thigh tortoise because of these big spurs on their thighs. So sulcata is the more scientific name for them. And they also live in Africa, so it's an African spur-thighed tortoise or sulcata tortoise, and they can grow to be really large. He's about he's 17. He's about 17 years old, and he could grow to be twice what he is now. And I'm not sure what we're going to do when he's twice the size he is now, but we're going to have to take care of him somehow, or give him to a zoo or something. But he'll come out and walk around, and sometimes we'll let him do that even during class. He'll walk around the classroom. I usually only do that when they're not going to cause any problems and distract you guys when you're trying to learn. This is a bearded dragon, and you've probably seen these in pet stores. And he's been with us for quite a while. And this one's, there are different varieties of bearded dragons, and some are redder and some are more yellow and orange. This guy's pretty orangey red. And he doesn't do much, as you can see. He's pretty calm. And they eat fruits and vegetables and insects. They're really mostly carnivorous, but we give them some fruits and vegetables too. So that's our bearded dragon. Then we've got a Niger skink. So we have two skinks. One's the blue-tongued skink, you know, that big lizard that has a blue tongue, and then this is a Niger skink, which is a much smaller kind of skink that lives in the desert, or a very arid environment anyway. And it's really good at burrowing and getting down underneath the sand. And that's really one hypothesis as to why skinks have such smooth scales, is to protect them from sand getting underneath their scales, so the sand just kind of falls off. And some skinks that live in, like the rainforest, the water's just going to run right off of them and bead right off of them and not sit on them and grow all kinds of fungus and stuff, algae and fungus. Next is another tortoise. This is a much smaller tortoise than our other two, but it's a Russian tortoise. And again, you've probably seen these in pet stores. They're pretty popular in the pet trade. A lot of the animals we have, or actually all the animals we have, are donated. They've been donated by people that don't want them anymore. So in that way, Zoology Club functions as a rescue. We take in these animals and keep them alive as long as we can. And some of them do very well here. Others don't always survive as long as they could or should, or they don't live out their entire lifespan, unfortunately. But that's a Russian tortoise. We've got a serious fruit fly problem. I don't know if you can see them flying around, but they're all over the place because we put out their food. We feed them every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and we put out their food so it sits from Monday to Friday, or from Monday to Wednesday, and Wednesday to Friday, and Friday to Monday, so it can sit out for quite a while, and fruit flies are just all over. Here we've got a cage full of Madagascar hissing cockroaches. And you may have seen these on TV, you know, that, like on Fear Factor, they make people eat them and stuff, you know, which you may think is pretty gross, and I suppose it would be. I dissected one of these when I was in college, and there's not much inside them, but some kind of stringy, yellowish white, stringy goo. So I imagine, you know, if I were to imagine eating one, which I haven't done and I don't plan on doing, it would be rather gross, because you take a bite of it and it would squirt the goo into your mouth, and yuck. So those are Madagascar hissing cockroaches. This is a culture that I've had for years, 10, 15 years. It's just been going and going and going. They just keep breeding. And I suppose since we're talking about cockroaches, we can take a look at this other species of cockroach that we keep. And we got these in to be primarily food. The plan is, or was, to use these as food. So these are a much smaller cockroach, and they look much more like the cockroaches that you might find in your home, depending on where you live, like down in Central and South America. They get to be this size, especially this size. This is an adult. Running all over the place like crazy. But we do use these as food to feed the animals, along with, since we're talking about food, let's come over and take a look at a couple other food items that we keep just for the sake of feeding the animals, because some of the animals are carnivores, as I pointed out. Now we'll come over and take a look at these superworms, and we keep these around for food. So this is one of the food items that we feed to those animals that we have that are carnivores. So again, they're known as superworms because, well, they're basically mealworms. Giant mealworms is one way you can think of them. And all these, they're not really worms, even though we call them worms. They're actually the larva of a big black beetle. So if we let them, they'll turn into big black beetles, and we've had that happen a number of times when worms have been in cages for a long time. Here we've got some crickets, and we keep them around for the same reason we have the dubia cockroaches and the superworms, and that's simply to be food for the animals that are carnivores. And one of the carnivores that we especially keep crickets for is another arthropod, just like the cockroaches and the superworms and the crickets. But this arthropod is not an insect like those are, it's an arachnid. This is a Chilean rose-hair tarantula, and we call her Rosie. And you can see why they call them rose-hair, because she's kind of reddish on her carapace. The front part of the spider is known as the carapace, and the back part's known as the abdomen. Actually, the front part's known as the cephalothorax, and the back part's known as the abdomen. The carapace is the covering of the cephalothorax. So when I said that the carapace is red, it is. That's just the covering of the cephalothorax. And she's real friendly. People hold her. The only thing you want to worry about when it comes to tarantulas is that these hairs on their abdomen, sometimes you'll see these guys and they'll be kind of bald on their abdomen, and that's because they've sloughed their hairs off as a means of defense. And they do that. The hairs will get embedded in your skin and irritate your skin, and especially if you're allergic to them. But worse, they get in your eyes and irritate your eyes. And I guess they can cause some really big problems. So that's our rose-haired tarantula. And I think there's only one other thing that oh, well, here are the goldfish. Again, we only keep the goldfish for food for the carnivores. So that's our goldfish aquarium there. And we've got hermit crabs. Like this guy sitting on the log here. We've got 2 hermit crabs at the moment. I usually order some every year, so I think I have 2 on order, so at some point we might have 4 as long as these guys survive. Hermit crabs being another arthropod. Anything that has an exoskeleton and jointed appendages is an arthropod. That's what arthropod means, is jointed foot. We'll be learning all about that when we get to studying classification. And then one of the grossest things that we have are these things called dermestid beetles. If you look closely, you can see beetles, small beetles, and beetle larvae crawling around here. And what they're doing is eating any animal flesh that they can find in here. And so I'll put some bilgejack dog food in here. I'll put goldfish that have died in the goldfish aquarium. I'll put them in here. But I'll also put larger animals in here, and that's what these bones are from. These bones are from a Chinese water dragon that we had for a number of years that died And so I put it in here, and they ate the flesh off of the bones, and all that's left are the bones. Unfortunately, a lot of decomposition took place too, and the bones didn't end up very good. You know, we don't have a good skull or anything. But here's some examples of some other lizards that I put in with the dermestid beetles and the skeletons that have resulted from that. The skulls and skeletons. So this was a leopard gecko, and no, this was a tokay gecko. I'm sorry, that was a tokay gecko. This was a leopard gecko, and this was a bearded dragon. So that's a bearded dragon skull and skeleton. It would be interesting to put those pieces together, wouldn't it? And I believe that's everything. So like I said, we'll be doing an activity. One of our first labs has to do with the animals, and you'll be taking a look at the animals and looking at their, observing them and looking at their adaptations and speculating about how they use those adaptations to survive in the wild. So that's where we'll leave it, and I hope you've enjoyed this introduction to the Zoology Club animals. Come to Zoology Club and help take care of them. Bye, Darwin.